Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three martinis coming up.
Well, we have no good martinis again for you today, so I hope you enjoyed the two that we had yesterday. But we got three big stories for you today, from Jeffrey Epstein to the ongoing gaslighting about the southern border, and also the ongoing double standard, I guess, when it comes to what it means to preserve democracy in this country. But let's dig into them one at a time. And Jim, parental discretion advised here as we talk about the list, or at least part of the list came out regarding people who were in contact with Jeffrey Epstein. It's important to point out that just because you're on the list doesn't mean you were sexually assaulting underage girls on Epstein's island and all these other sorts of very tawdry and completely illegal things he was doing. And I'm sure some of it was also not on the island, Manhattan, Palm Beach, and so forth. So we've got this long list of people, some of them based on the testimony of the victims in all these Epstein cases, shows that, at least according to their allegations, that a couple of them were, in fact, having relations with underage girls, including the head fund manager, Glenn Dublin, as well as the chairman of Hyatt Hotels, a guy named Tom Pritzker, who, of course, you probably know that family's got some pretty strong political ties. Bill Clinton is mentioned in there several times. One of the victims mentions that Epstein once told her that Clinton liked women on the young side, I think is how it was phrased. And so
likes them young was the way.
Likes them young, right.
Yeah.
We've got Bill Richardson. We've got Prince Andrew. We've got George Mitchell Dershowitz, who, of course, continues to maintain his innocence, Al Gore, Stephen Hawking, George Lucas, Donald Trump, Michael Jackson, David Copperfield, Ehud Barak, Kevin Spacey. I mean, some of these names already associated with some pretty seedy behavior. Others might have actually just been at a meeting. Who knows? But what's the significance, I guess, of the list and what still remains unanswered, which I guess is a lot?
Sure. Well, one thing is we probably should not, I don't know if the list is the best term for this, but we're getting released yesterday, and apparently more will come today, is close to 950 pages of court documents stemming from one of the victims, Virginia Giuffre, I'm guessing, against Ghislaine Maxwell. In that defamation lawsuit, there was a great deal of testimony. Many names were famous people were mentioned. These names were redacted. And so we had, apparently Clinton was referred to as John Doe number, whichever number it was. It was a high one. There are a lot of John Does in the released testimony, and now they're getting names matched to them. I think that quote jumps out. Now, I heard people, this is hearsay. Okay, this is someone who is saying that something Jeffrey Epstein said. Epstein is dead, hung himself, or seemed to hang himself in his prison cell years ago. But there's a considerable amount of circumstantial evidence, I suppose you would say. Bill Clinton, as far as I know, only issued one statement ever saying he knew nothing about Epstein's crimes, and he only traveled on Epstein's private plane, the one nicknamed the Lolita Express, 4 times. Now, Fox News did subsequent investigation and found that flight records indicated Clinton had been on that plane for at least 26 flights. And oh, by the way, back when Bill Clinton was in the White House, in like 93, 94, 95, Jeffrey Epstein visited the White House 17 times. So very hard to believe, I barely know the guy. No. Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein spent a lot of time together. And back in 2020, when we were all dealing with the pandemic and lots of other news going around, a photo came out showing Bill Clinton having his shoulders massaged by one of Epstein's accusers during a 2002 stopover for a refueling of Epstein's jet. They're fully clothed. It's in some sort of like airport waiting lounge. But it is, further circumstantial evidence that Bill Clinton, Jeffrey Epstein, and a whole bunch of women, some of whom may well have been underage, were all hanging out at the same place at the same time. And Bill Clinton has really never been subjected to any serious interview about this. I think there was an in today's Post article, they made a reference to this being MAGA. Trump supporters are very interested in this. I would hope a lot of people would be really interested in this, because it's now been 4 or 5 years and we still have a whole bunch of questions. The first thing, we don't know how Jeffrey Epstein made his fortune. Now, in this circumstance, it's very easy to imagine blackmail, It's very easy to imagine insider trading. He's interacting with so many high, powerful chief executives, things like that. The fake passports with his face that were found in his safe. And the fact that we keep having new revelations about who he was meeting with. Wall Street Journal has done some excellent reporting on this. Not the names you've known, but also, one of the things that jumps out at me, I was just mentioning this to someone, are the names of people who are not necessarily famous, not necessarily celebrities, but influential in their own right. Leon Botstein, the president of Bard College, invited Epstein, who brought a group of young female guests to the campus. Noam Chomsky, professor, author, and political activist, was scheduled to fly with Epstein to have dinner at Epstein's Manhattan townhouse in 2015. Now, I'm sure a lot of listeners, Greg, know who Chomsky is, but just in case you don't know, he's a linguistic professor, and I looked up some of the names of his books. Manufacturing Consent, Understanding Power, Necessary Illusions, and Who Rules the World. But I just picked those book titles at random. There's no recurring theme coming through all of them. Anyway, we were talking about how to characterize this as, good, bad, or crazy martini. I suppose a little bit of all of them. We're getting more information about the breadth and depth of Epstein's social circle. No, if you show up in his appointment list or you had a meeting with him or lunch or something, no, it's not necessarily a sign that you were a client or procuring underage girls for sex, but it certainly puts a cloud of suspicion. And everything we've learned about this story gives you strong hints that there's something more going on there, that this was a far-reaching, extensive network. And the quote is, it's from 2020, but it jumped out at me and I put it in today's morning newsletter. Cindy McCain, wife of former Senator and presidential candidate John McCain, back in 2020, she's giving a speech and she says, Epstein was hiding in plain sight. We all knew about him. We all knew what he was doing, but we had no legal aspect that would go after him. They were afraid of him. For whatever reason, they were afraid of him. End quote. And to the best of my knowledge, there's been no follow-up or elaboration on this. So why were authorities afraid of Jeffrey Epstein? Who was afraid of him? Who chose not to prosecute or not to investigate based on this? I mean, this is kind of this, and I know there's all kinds of crazy conspiracy theories, and this kind of, slides into QAnon territory and stuff like that. But man, there were a lot of people who knew Jeffrey Epstein and hung around him. And it sounds like everywhere he went, he was surrounded by young women. Now, you can't always tell if someone's above or under the age 18 by looking at them, but let's just say they all look pretty young and nobody seemed to want to do anything about it. Or when somebody did want to do something about it, nobody reacted. It's a stinks to high heaven. I'm glad we're getting the information out today. I'm glad we're getting more information. You like to see everything come out of this. And you got this sneaking suspicion that some very unsavory, powerful, well-connected people are still being protected to this day.
And we'll possibly never see the client list. I think a reckoning would be appropriate in that way. And I just wonder, given all these powerful people, once Epstein had compromising material on at least some of them, what policy decisions were made? What national security secrets got out? How did he use that power over them once they were guilty of compromised behavior? So a lot of answers still to come here. And why do they want to be around him in the first place, other than on the tawdry side? So many unanswered questions in all of this. But drip, 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 here it comes. All right, Jim, on to another bad martini now, and this is one we've talked about a lot. This is our southern border, which is seeing the worst numbers of illegal entries into the country ever. We don't have the official numbers for December yet, but according to reports that deal with sources inside Customs and Border Protection, December was north of 300,000 apprehensions, and that doesn't include the ones who avoided apprehension. So conceivably, it's quite a bit above 300,000. And so the question remains, why does this keep happening, and why does this administration do nothing to stop the flow? And so that was the question from Willie Geist on Morning Joe yesterday to Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. So here's the question and Mayorkas' ridiculous answer.
Border Patrol in the month of December processed more migrants entering the United States illegally than any month in the history of that agency. Why is that happening? How do you explain it?
So we are seeing the greatest number of displaced people, not only at our southern border, not only in the Western Hemisphere, but across the globe. You know, I am involved in bilateral and multilateral meetings with my counterparts from foreign countries in Europe, in Asia, in the Indo-Pacific, all over the world. In migration, the challenge of displaced people is a subject that comes up in every single conversation. We have the effects of climate change, poverty, increasing level of authoritarianism, the very many challenges that are at the root cause of the displacement of people around the world.
Climate change, poverty, and increasing authoritarianism. Jim, a lot of these people aren't even from Latin America. They're coming from Asia and Africa. There's not another country that's not trying to kill them, allegedly. They can't apply for asylum in any one of these other countries along the way. This is ridiculous. This hasn't happened under any other administration. They claim they're doing everything. Now you've got Karine Jean-Pierre claiming this week that, they would be able to do more, but congressional Republicans won't do more to work to fix this broken immigration system. The executive branch has a ton of authority to do what's needed to protect our country, and they just won't do it.
Not only that, they are, actively telling the state of Texas, you can't enforce these laws. You can't put up the, barriers and barbed wire and the stuff in the river to prevent people from swimming across and things like that. I heard that quote, Greg, and I really started thinking, what's it like to be Mayorkas when he goes to bed at night? How do you look in the mirror and say, I'm doing a great job? Because let's face it, if there's a decent chance Joe Biden will not be reelected later this year. And if he does, the situation at the border and immigration and waves of migrants and asylum seekers and the busloads that are being come in from border states over to the big cities, that's going to be a big factor. Not the only factor. I think we'd all agree probably inflation is the biggest factor, but 1A or a close second is probably going to be the immigration crisis, the migration crisis, the border, et cetera. Meaning if you're Mayorkas, you are screwing your boss in his odds for reelection. Don't you feel bad about that? Don't you feel guilty about that? And how do you go in front of the television cameras and say, oh, yeah, this is climate change? I still genuinely believe Americans, are perfectly welcoming of legal immigrants. Welcome them with open arms. We want to see them succeed. We want to see them thrive. And we just don't want illegal immigration. You would have think in 3 years of this presidency, after Joe Biden insisted this is a normal seasonal pattern, and we kept seeing those numbers go higher and higher when they get issued each month by the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, you would think eventually people in the Biden administration, wow, even if we think as many people should be led to the country as possible, we should recognize that this is going to hurt us. We're going to lose re-election. Trump's going to win. Trump, who looked like he was utterly unelectable in January 2021, is now going to come back largely because of this issue, because people trust him to take care of it, because they think he's a tough guy, and nobody believes that we're willing to handle this stuff. The entire, just on the issue of asylum claims alone, Americans are compassionate and understanding people. And if you speak out against your government and your government marks you for death, heck yeah, we'll give you asylum. We don't want to see people getting executed by authoritarian regimes. But what's happening in these asylum claims is people stop saying, oh, I'm a political dissident. They start saying things like, I am in danger of the gangs up in my country. Well, that's really a problem for countries like El Salvador and Nicaragua and Central America and places in Central America. It's not the job of the United States to allow everybody who feels threatened by criminal gangs overseas to move here. That's not what the asylum program is for. The asylum program is supposed to be for people who are political dissidents, who are being marked for death. There are plenty of places in this world where that's legitimate. But you can't let all of Central America in based on that. And you certainly can't do it on come back in the year 2031 or whatever it is, and we'll evaluate your asylum claim. It is it becomes de facto open borders. And that's what we're dealing with here. And to hear Mayorkas look at this and say, well, this is really because of climate change. No. This is a result of your policies, as a result of your rhetoric. This is what happens when the president comes and campaigns against the border enforcement policies of his predecessor, and on day one undoes a whole bunch of them. It is cause and it is effect. And they're living with the consequences. And Joe Biden's reelection bid may well be one of the casualties of this deliberate policy decision.
Exactly. And one of the areas that's fomenting this problem is Venezuela, which is a failed Marxist state. based on a number of sources that I'm seeing, it is basically a clearinghouse for people who want to come to the United States for whatever reason, and they'll give you whatever papers you think you need to get across the border. And there are some reports also that Venezuela is sending their undesirables up here, kind of like Cuba did with the Mariel boat lift and so forth a number of decades ago. So whatever's happening, we're not doing much about it, other than apparently encouraging Venezuela to pump more oil because we won't do it. Really tough policy there.
Jobs Americans won't do. Actually, I'm sorry, jobs Americans aren't allowed to do.
Right, exactly. All right, let's talk about our fantastic sponsor of 4 Patriots, makers of many fine products, including the best-selling survival food kits. These food kits are delicious tasting. They're designed to last for 25 years. The kits come with real meat and vegetables, and they are great for taking on camping trips or picnics, but they're best in emergencies. If power is out, you can just boil water over a fire, simmer, and serve, and enjoy hot meals during a crisis. But make sure you go to 4patriots.com/martini and keep an eye on their weekly specials, 2 of which are this week the Sauna Wrap Therapeutic Blanket, which is 80% off, and the Solar Go Fridge, which keeps things cold without using ice. So make sure to check those out. Visit 4patriots.com/martini to see this week's discounts and deals before they are gone, and get free shipping on orders over $97. Save more and get peace of mind now by going to the number 4patriots.com/martini. That's 4patriots.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to our final martini. I think it could probably be classified as bad and crazy. We are officially in 2024, which means it's election year, and Joe Biden is kicking off his campaign, I believe, tomorrow in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, making it clear that his focus is on saving our democracy. He's making this the kind of the centerpiece of his campaign, it would appear, as he assumes Trump will be the nominee, which the numbers suggest that he will be. But he's out with a new ad, part of which says this.
There's an extremist movement that does not share the basic beliefs in our democracy. All of us are being asked right now, what will we do to maintain our democracy? History's watching. The world is watching. Most important, our children and grandchildren will hold us responsible. The Vice President and I have supported voting rights since day one of this administration, and I ask every American to join me in this cause.
Not sure what he means by voting rights. Does that mean no voter ID? Does that mean you can just show up at the polls and register then? I don't know exactly what he means by that. But, Jim, I feel like the Democrats are torturing the word democracy to mean almost nothing at this point. And it's also a massive contradiction happening. Not only do you have at least a few Biden allies trying to prevent Trump from getting on the ballot in Maine and Colorado, but they're also keeping his potential Democratic primary opponents off the ballot. Now, I assume they would be mere speed bumps at best on his road to the nomination. But nonetheless, Dean Phillips, the congressman from Minnesota, is filing challenges with the DNC and several states, including Florida, North Carolina, and Tennessee, after being excluded from the ballot. Semaphore with the story. I'm reading it out of the Hill here. Quote, unilaterally taking away the right of rank-and-file Democrats, including a disproportionate number of black voters, demanding a more affordable America is reprehensible, Phillips said in a statement to Semaphore. If Joe Biden is the best candidate to defeat Donald Trump and lead us to a safer, more affordable future, let him compete for that privilege without his supporters suppressing and disenfranchising millions of voters. And so, Jim, when Biden keeps touting his commitment to being the guardian of democracy, I can only go back to The Princess Bride, and you keep using that word, but I don't think it means what you think it means.
No, it's a very good, excellent reference and good way of putting it, Greg, because, one of my employers, the Washington Post, had the slogan, democracy dies in darkness. Sometimes it dies in the Florida sunshine. The Florida Democratic Party just decided we're not going to do a primary this year. And never mind the fact that Dean Phillips is running. Never mind that Marianne Williamson is running. Like you could think these are not serious candidates or dismiss them, but they're running. They would get on the ballot if the Florida Democratic Party would allow them to have it. But Florida Democrats are like, nope, we don't need one. That's democracy. This is the party that's going to defend democracy. A whole bunch of Democrats have completely conflated the concept of democracy, i.e. free and fair elections, with my party wins. And I don't think you can find a better expression of it Then Rob Reiner, this is back in about mid-November, he tweeted out, quote, "If you vote for anyone but Joe Biden, you are voting to destroy American democracy," unquote. You're chuckling because you're basically saying, look, in order to save democracy, we have to take away your freedom to vote for the candidate you want. That's not how it works. That is burning the village down in order to save it, right? The whole concept is you have a choice. By the way, I'll remind you, even Trump gets a nomination, Biden gets a Democratic nomination. We have two more cranky, yelling old men on the debate stage. There will be other candidates running, and you can vote for them. You'll always have a choice. Don't let anybody fool you into believing you. You can write in candidates in a whole bunch of states. But this idea of, well, you have to vote for one guy. No, you don't. Oh, it's the only way to save democracy. Well, if you don't have any choice, then you don't have the democracy. The argument that won't get made here, Joe Biden has been president for 3 years, going into a fourth, and he was very much elected saying, this was a battle for the soul of the American people. Well, if we're right back where we were in 2020, how well did Joe Biden fight for the soul of the American people? Why have things not improved? Why is, at this point, Donald Trump even more popular than in 2020? I went back and I checked. It was May 2019. Joe Biden was telling Democrats, the thing that will fundamentally change with Donald Trump out of the office, not a joke, is you will see an epiphany occur among many of my Republican friends. Didn't really shake out that way. Now, did it? Even with January 6th. So I would look at that and I'd say, well, one of the reasons that the Republican Party is still enamored with Donald Trump and still, things are as partisan, as divided as ever, is that every time Joe Biden had the opportunity to pour water on the burning fires of partisan divisions in this country, he poured gasoline. He had a whole bunch of opportunities to make things better, and he did not do so. He pushed for, he did not get a whole bunch of Republican votes for anything other than the infrastructure bill. He had no problem ramming things through on 50-50 votes and having Kamala Harris be the tiebreaker. In the end, getting what he wanted was much more important to him than having any kind of bipartisan comity cooperation or something like that. If you don't believe me, talk to Mitch McConnell, who's old buddies with Joe Biden. And Mitch McConnell will pointed out that Joe Biden went out and said that the Georgia law was Jim Crow 2.0, Jim Eagle, right? And he said the people who were doing that were standing with, you could stand with Dr. King, or you could stand with the Klan or other, segregationists. Joe Biden was a partisan arsonist for most of the first 3 years that he's in office. Well, when you do that, you don't calm the passions on the other side. You don't make people feel the number of times Joe Biden went out and did things. He had said he didn't have the constitutional authority to just forgive student loans. And then when he needed to do it, he just turned around and did it. And he got smacked down at the Supreme Court. When you act like a partisan hack, you can't be the bipartisan healer. You have to choose one. And Joe Biden made his choice. And now he's living with the consequences of that choice. So the idea that he can go back and say, you got to elect me to be, to save democracy. No, you've been the arsonist for the past 4 years. So anyway, that's where we are, America. Good luck. Two cranky old men yelling at it again. But don't let anybody fool you into saying, you got to vote for this guy. Otherwise, democracy is doomed.
No, it's ridiculous. And I think back to his speech a couple months before the midterms. He was up at Independence Hall with the seventh layer of hell backdrop there with the black and the red and screaming about MAGA extremism. And then he laid it out that if you're pro-life or believe in traditional marriage, or basically if you disagree with his agenda, you're a MAGA extremist. So we've gone from we're saving the very pillars of the American system to these people disagree with me. They're extreme. The game is pretty darn transparent at this point.
Indeed it is, Greg. Is it Friday yet?
One more day. Tomorrow is. Jim, have a good one. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
He's Jim Garrity of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Do subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch if you don't already. Tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific Thursday, and please join us on Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch. Parental discretion advised here as we talk about